Omni Consumer Products. You need a new heart? OCP. You need a new body? OCP. You need a new military? OCP. Has your city become rotten with crime? Do you need a new one? OCP. Because they'll fix you. They fix everything. This is RoboCop.
I noticed the first point, and then I realized they were gradually getting uncomfortably close, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta endure this."
Yeah. I thought of that just right now.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Improv.
Well, it worked. It worked. You know,
Thank you.
It was like momentum.
Okay, so wow, I forgot how to do this for a second. I literally forgot what I was going to say. We haven't shot an episode in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Altaf was out of town for a little bit. You want to kind of tell that story real quick, or do you want to kind of skim by that one?
So I was going on this big international trip and meeting my family at Atlanta, and we were going to fly there together. And, you know, we get to check into our flight. Parents give their passport. My sister give their passport. Everything's fine. I give my passport. And they're like, you can't travel with this. And I'm like, huh? And they said, where you're going requires your passport to be 6 months valid. Yours expires in 5 months. So my passport was going to expire in August, and then like it needed to be valid until September. And so there was like no way around it either. It wasn't even like the flight was going to take off in 3 hours. If I wanted to get a 24-hour emergency turnaround, it would have to be somewhere in DC or New York for that to actually happen. Like there was literally no way around this.
Yeah.
And they couldn't so we eventually got the refund and everything was fine. But that night it was really stressful, right? So we're like, okay, well, do I just go back to LA, or do I just go back to my to Knoxville with my parents for the rest of the time I already took off work? Like, what do we do? My dad pulls an audible. It's at the Atlanta airport, and he's like, listen, Orlando is 6-hour drive away from here. We can still have a smaller vacation in Orlando. You guys down? And it's like 8 p.m. at that point. I've done a full day of travel because I've come from LA to Atlanta. I'm already exhausted on 3 hours of sleep, but we're like, yeah, let's do it. We drive to 6 hours to Orlando. It's a great time. We spend 5 days there. We do Magic Kingdom. I haven't done Disney in a while, so it was very exciting. And then we do Universal Orlando. I went on the Hulk ride. It was very fun, amongst other things. But it was just like a wild turn of events. And then now we're back. We're doing RoboCop. But this episode was supposed to be shot like a while ago.
Yeah. So this is one we've built up for a little while. We both watched it like 2 weeks ago as well, getting ready to shoot it, and then just some you guys know us, any listeners, you know how things go around these parts. So I guess as we've been doing around these parts for the past couple episodes, what's some art that changed you recently before we fully jump into RoboCop?
Whenever I'm back home, I watch more Indian movies with my family than I usually do when I'm in LA. And we watched one on Netflix that like we had all seen before. It came out in 2008, but it's a favorite of me and my dad's. It's called Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. It's an Indian movie that is it's a road trip comedy about 3 friends that like are, let's say they're in their like late 30s. One of them is getting married, and back in college they had all made a plan that whoever gets married, we're gonna do a trip together for their bachelor party that is gonna be an international trip, and throughout that trip each person picks an adventure sport that the other 2 don't know about, and they have to take part in it, and it's like a bonding thing of like facing your fears. So each of them have some emotional baggage that they're carrying with them. They're older, they were friends a lot, but they've kind of lost connection, and throughout this trip they bond and find themselves again. And the title of the movie is called Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, and the translation for that is that the direct translation of it is you won't get this life again. It's very much about what it means to be alive, and maybe you've lost touch with that and how you can get that back.
So it's like a sentimental bromance comedy kind of thing. That's fun.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've seen that movie so many times, but every time I go back home, me and my dad always watch it. So it's nice.
Cool. It's like a comfort food movie for you.
100%.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I wonder if anyone who's listening has heard of it. And for anyone, if we have any listeners that are into Indian cinema, please sound off in the comments, wherever you are, just because I think.
Yeah. And I'll put the title of that movie in the description too.
And we'll probably pop it up in the video edit too. Or a
Yeah,
poster
yeah,
or
yeah. So if you
something,
do want to check it out, it's on Netflix. It's been on Netflix for a while, so I'm pretty sure it's going to stay there.
Yeah.
But
okay. For me, it's like a couple little things, because while you were gone, I was trying to pass the time as well. And you know this already, but I've been replaying Doom Eternal. That's one of them. And I've been having a blast playing that game. I mean, for those who don't know, Doom is basically just a bullet fest, fucking blood splattering, demon killing frenzy game where you literally are just a buff ass dude in a suit of armor slaughtering demons. There's a story, there's a little lore behind who the Doom Slayer is and all that stuff.
But it's like true escapism.
Yeah, it's like you play it just because you want to do terrible things to demons for a while.
Same reason you watch like a John Wick movie.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it's like that. And so there's a new one coming soon, and I'm really excited for it. So I started playing Doom Eternal again. And the main thing that you and I talked about that game that I loved is it felt like it was made by people that wanted to make it. And that's something that you and I have just been kind of saying on our own of like, oh, this felt like people wanted to make it, which I think, I don't know, listeners, if you guys get that, but when you experience something where there's a difference between something that just feels like it was there for the bottom line versus something that someone genuinely cared about and wanted to express themselves in.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Especially with big IP projects that are released by studios, sometimes it feels like, oh, this was for the stockholders.
Exactly.
And it's nice. It's always exciting to see some form of art that was like, oh no, the person behind them was like really excited to express themselves.
Exactly. Like even on the MCU, we've seen, obviously I'm not going to get fully into it, but we've seen the Marvel movies that felt like they were just there because they were spat out by some factory.
And then we've seen like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Exactly what I was going to say. Then Guardians felt like it was made by people that wanted to make it,
Yeah, that were passionate about those people.
So that's one of them. Then the other thing is recently, like a week ago, I showed my friend Samurai Cop, which I haven't watched that movie in a long time. I haven't seen it since we did that reaction to it.
Really?
Yeah, I never sat down and watched it since then.
I'm gonna move my head so people can see the Samurai Cop like lion back there. If you've seen the movie, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah. So that was really fun. I watched it again, and goddamn, that movie. The thing is that I will say is, and I think I said it in the reaction too, it's still really entertaining. That's the thing that makes it so much fun. It like has momentum and moves.
I'm not a fan of the so bad it's good genre. I've said that many times, maybe even on this podcast, but Samurai Cop is one of the few where I find a lot of joy in it just because of that. It is just like, you could watch it as a really entertaining action movie if you wanted to. Yeah, that's great. Those are great picks.
Yeah. I haven't seen it in a while, so it was a lot of fun to come back to.
So Chris, how did RoboCop change you?
Oh man, this is a movie that I've heard about a lot throughout my upbringing. I first came across it probably when I was like 9 or 8. And basically like my dad got me some software that had a collection of a shitload of arcade games that were on PC.
Wait, is this how you came across it?
This is how I first discovered RoboCop. Yeah.
Got it.
The existence of RoboCop. Because like basically had like, just Frogger and Mario, just random fucking games. And one of them was RoboCop. And I happened to click on it and I realized the movie existed. My dad told me what it was. He didn't let me watch it for obvious reasons we'll get into.
Right.
But I knew RoboCop existed. And I've had friends that loved RoboCop growing up.
Yeah.
And it's been in my movie, peripheral for a long time. And I think you and I first watched it during COVID. Right?
Yes.
Because we went through like kind of an 80s bender.
I don't think we did. Yeah, so we did. Oh, yeah, we did kind of, because we watched Road Warrior, Predator, and RoboCop all within the span of 2 weeks during COVID. Not for any content, not for like reactions or podcasting or our old movie review show, just because we wanted to watch it together.
And to be fair, I mean, we probably like our channel at the time was significantly smaller than it ended up getting during COVID. Like it ended up growing like at the tail end of COVID, I think, pretty quick.
Yes.
And so I feel like we probably, looking back, I feel like we should have done a reaction.
We talk about it. We've talked about it many times. I'm like, damn, if we saved RoboCop for a reaction. But yeah, we watched it.
But basically, though,
had you never seen any bits or pieces of it even before then?
I knew the lines. I knew people who quoted like "Dead or alive, you're coming with me," and I also knew the line like "Thank you for your cooperation."
The iconography behind it.
Yeah, I knew the iconography, and I knew what RoboCop looked like because I've seen the poster and stuff. But
right.
I always wrote it off as like a hacky kind of like, oh, this is like another kind of Commando or like one of those classic corny action movies. Because it looks like it. If you just told someone there's a movie called RoboCop and you show the cover, part man, part machine, all cop, it looks corny, and it is to an extent, but I didn't expect it to have that level of like actual, brain power behind it, where they actually had something meaningful to say out of it, which is what's really cool. And it gave me the feeling that something like that could actually exist.
Yeah, I think I had the exact opposite experience where before watching it with you, I didn't hear anything about it. I didn't know any of the lines. I didn't know any of the iconography. I hadn't come across it at all. The closest I had come to coming across RoboCop was when the remake was coming out. And all I knew was that, oh, this is based off an older movie.
Yeah,
Like this was, but that's it. Like I didn't even like care to look into it because I was like, it's a 1980s movie called RoboCop. It's probably gonna be really cheesy or whatever. Like I didn't even know it was considered a great movie.
Like one of the greatest sci-fi movies ever made.
I had no idea. So I remember, I think it was maybe you that was suggesting we should watch RoboCop just for fun. Like you've been wanting to watch it. And I was like, all right, cool. I'll watch it with you. And I think the way it changed me was it was the first Verhoeven movie I had seen. And therefore, it was the first time I realized that you could do heavy satire like this while also having it be a great genre movie. Like he was able to make a great sci-fi action movie and also like a great body horror movie. And at the same time, such strong satire. And I was like, I didn't even know that was like a possibility until I saw that. And maybe there was other movies before Verhoeven's RoboCop or even after that I'm not thinking about. But when I saw that, I was like, oh fuck, like when it opens with that news footage and even the way those news reporters are acting, I'm like, oh no, they're in on the joke. This is interesting. Like I didn't know you could do that with news footage and like make that part of the storytelling, which is what he does in Total Recall, especially what he does in Starship Troopers. But it was a really like kind of an eye-opening thing of like, oh, movies can do that too.
Yeah. It's interesting because like when I was going to school for screenwriting, my script at the time was heavy satire, and so it's funny. It's a movie I wish I watched when I was writing during that time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I would have written something nearly as good as RoboCop, but there was still something to, I always felt kind of like alone in that camp of wanting to write shit that makes fun of things or kind of has like exaggerated, ideals to kind of make fun of modern society.
Do you want to give a hint of like what the premise of your satire was?
To be honest, not really, because it dealt with kind of sensitive subject matter that I don't want to get into.
Yeah, fair enough.
But you know what it is, right? I think I told you. Yeah, so I'm like, nah, I'm good. But with that being said, I guess it was just really cool to see, like you said, in the opening news footage, how like they crash zoom on all of the newsmen and it does that grid of all of them at the same time. That shot still makes me laugh.
It's not all the newsmen, it's just two
or
people.
just the two, just the two.
But it's just their eyes multiplied. And then they transition from like horrible war tragedies that are going around in the world to like, and meanwhile,
and now this.
And again, it was something that like, I guess Anchorman, when I think about it, I had seen Anchorman obviously before RoboCop, and Anchorman kind of does that in a way, but it's such hard comedy, Anchorman.
Yeah.
And I think what's impressive about RoboCop is that it's able to do like really funny satire while also telling quite an emotionally upsetting story about this Officer Murphy who from the opening like scenes, you're kind of with him because he's such a, like, he wants to be such a good father and have his kid be proud of him. That's why he practices the gun trick. He's brave. Right when like they're after Kurtwood Smith and the other robbers, he like, give me a piece. He puts on the helmet, leans out. Like he's a strong officer. He wants to be a good dad, and he gets brutally massacred, gets bought out by a corporation that turn him into something against his will for their own benefit.
Well, he's dead, so technically it's not even like his will. They just repurposed his corpse.
But then we can talk about whether he's still in there or not.
We'll get to that part. But you know what? I'm just agreeing with you that that's even more fucked up. He didn't even. It's not even like against his will, quote unquote. It's past that point.
Exactly.
So. Yeah, I mean, can I jump in real quick on what you're when you were tailing off on like the news part is like, because the way they talk about horrible things and then transition, it already establishes like a world of disconnect between the people in power and then what's really going on. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Because like the corporate people, when it cuts over to them, that they're going through their own corporate ladder drama of, oh, I'm taking over this thing, after so and so fucked up the presentation. They don't give a fuck about anything happening like for the safety of the city. You know what I'm saying? All they're dealing with their own personal selfish drama, just trying to ascend.
Well, it's what happens all the time with like human nature. Like that's just what happens, which is
Yeah.
like you form a bubble and anything outside of the bubble doesn't exist. So if your bubble is this corporation and you work here, you just want to save your ass. You want to keep your job. You want to move up the ladder, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of just what happens. So they're not really thinking about the city that they're working for.
Yeah.
They're just thinking about how they can get promoted, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I think, you know, it's very obviously this isn't really saying much, but it's clearly just a big satire on capitalism. And
Yeah.
but it's just funny though, because I think, you know, we just watched the first episode of The Studio,
Yeah.
which is completely different, you know, but there's still very much a satirical tone in there.
Of course
making
there is,
fun
yeah.
of, yeah, exactly. But it still has the same kind of thing of like when, you know, you go into a job with good intentions and wanting to do something great with it because you're, you know, that's what got you into it, you know, in the first place. And then you learn that like everyone there does not give a shit about what they're actually, you know, what they're really creating. You know, they're just trying to create a functioning business. And that's what the corporation in this movie is doing too. No different.
It's a very cynical but true view on capitalism, which is like there's no way around it. That is what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you want to take part, what are you?
I just remembered that how they all end up having like their own special executive bathroom too. Like, it gets to such ridiculous proportions of how much it makes fun of those suits.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, those kind of people exist. They just wear different clothes now. But they still exist.
I feel like there were a lot of movies in the 80s and 90s that made fun of suits, and I feel like they're not as popular now.
They're not making fun of suits now, but they do. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that makes fun of like, I mean, there was 6 seasons of HBO Silicon Valley that came out.
Yeah, it's it evolved.
It's a new vibe now.
Yeah, but I just remember how many movies. You know, obviously we got like the American Psycho and like Gremlins 2, and you know certain movies that make fun of like corporate culture.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like now, because back then there was this idea of selling out is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Once you've sold out to the man, you have no like integrity, right? And so that this movie especially is diving into how like commercials control the news, advertising is such a big part of how everything runs. So while the world is shit, buy a car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like now no one really gives a shit if anyone's selling out.
Well, now it's like expected to. I mean, you and I are in a completely different field than what these movies deal with, but you and I being in fields of content creation, you know, not just for our own personal nice dude movie night stuff, but also we've worked for, you know, other content creators too in our time.
Right.
And so we've both seen firsthand those sorts of things. But when it comes to like getting brand deals and certain, you know, like you said, selling out, those are like expected now. Like when you land a brand deal, people congratulate you. Now it's like looked at as like, oh, your channel's legit.
And dude, just like 10 to 15 years ago in the early days of YouTube, I remember when like a channel would get a sponsor, there would be so many comments like, I can't believe you sold out. Just like over a decade ago, right? And now it's gotten to a point if like you'll see like a 15-year-old fake a sponsorship on Instagram just because it gives him more clout that I got a sponsorship.
Isn't that funny? I forget that's a thing, but I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting, like the world we're living in right now.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do the thing which I do with you a lot off mic, which is like kind of just get really doomsday about everything.
Yeah.
But it is like scary when you see how easily how accepted selling out is.
Yeah, I
because
mean, like,
it almost feels like people gave up in fighting it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I feel like you and I did a lot of brand deals ourselves, so
Sure.
we have like a perspective on that sort of
100%.
thing. You know? So I guess I don't want to fully go totally off the rails from RoboCop, but like I am fascinated by like what the difference is between like, you know, selling out and just trying to, you know, meet in the middle somewhere to keep your channel alive, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's not also the people who are like getting sponsored. It's not their fault because also the way the world is built now, you got to have 5 different gigs to survive, especially if you're working. We're talking about working in entertainment. Like if you're working in entertainment, you can't just survive off one job anymore. Fucking Amy Poehler has a podcast. Like, what do we do? You know what I mean? Fucking Amy Poehler has a podcast.
A lot of celebrities have podcasts.
No, but
nowadays.
you know why they talk about it? They're like, okay, well, you know, acting, you don't really make money off that anymore, so we have to do this. Like everyone, I heard Amy Poehler read an Uber Eats ad yesterday. It's insane. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's the it's a systemic problem. There is like the way these jobs, I mean, that's the reason why 2023 those strikes were going on. It's just like we put in so much work, make barely any money off it, so now like comedians have to start Patreons. It's like weird.
When you said systemic problem, it does remind me, because I read somewhere, so this isn't my original thought about RoboCop, and I don't remember where this came from, so I apologize. But I remember reading somewhere that someone made a point about how crime is so rampant in Detroit, right? It's horrible what's going on, all this stuff, but it never blames like drugs or family values or poor education or whatever. It looks at it like the corporations are the ones that are doing it because they're privatizing like the police and hospitals and all these things, that people aren't getting the protection that they need, and so it's fucking up. It has an interesting perspective on why corruption happens, because virtually everywhere is corrupt now, and that's what trickles down into the rest of where we all suffer as a result.
And what's interesting about the head of OCP, when he's like talking about Delta City, he talks about how old Detroit is a cancer. Yeah. And it's going to be wiped out. We're going to and I feel like that is the fucking, without getting too much into it, that is the Musk and Doge method.
Yeah.
We just got to wipe everything out.
Yeah.
Like there's no like room for nuance. There's no room for like actually exploring the problem. No, let's just kill it. The reason I'm bringing up Elon Musk and Doge, even though I know it's like a thing that no one really wants to hear about right now, is that it's important when you look at this movie and you kind of consider the fact that like there's so much stuff that we can still relate to today. Mm-hmm. And I think a question I wanted to ask you, like the point of these movies are to like express like what's going on through genre, right? Mm-hmm. Like express big ideas of what's going on in the world through genre. Do you think movies actually have any power to change change the world? If I were to just put it that bluntly, if constantly after decades after this movie come out, we're still being like, it's still so relevant today. Like, what are the point of these type of movies if the problems keep getting repeated? Mm-hmm. Like, what are we gaining from these movies, right? Because they are trying to say something, but aside from saying something, what's the point,
I think, it's not as black and white as like, did RoboCop save the world or not? Which I'm not saying you're asking that, but, I'm just kind of...
to be clear, I'm just like proposing this question. I don't think like just because Bob Dylan talked about war doesn't mean war will never exist. I know that.
But what I think, what even Bob Dylan or like art in itself, especially stuff like music, but movies as well and anything, books, they plant seeds, I think is what they do. And I think like, even if, let's say it's not as literal as like a corporate head watch RoboCop and is like, wow, I'm going to quit my job because I don't believe, you know what I'm saying? It's not going to play out that way.
Yeah.
But it might still make someone think a little differently. It might make them critically think and then pick up another book, or something like that. And then it might guide someone's whole life into another direction. And I feel like listeners, that's what this show is, right? Like listeners, you got to relate to that to some extent, even on a small scale, even if it's like personal relationships or, your family or what it means to you, art can move you in different ways.
Oh yeah.
And so,
I mean, I'll give a small example of like the way art kind of didn't like, it kind of showed me a perspective that I never thought about. Mm-hmm. I remember when Get Out came out, and then the idea from that movie, a movie that's filled with many ideas, a big idea from that movie that really stood out to me, has always stuck with me, is like this feeling that I think we had post, like right after Obama, where we all kind of felt like maybe at least like, non-black people or like mainly white people felt that like we've kind of like solved racism. We got the black president. Everything feels more liberal, right? Yeah. It's like we've done it. Like it's not as bad as it was before. Mm-hmm. And I remember when Get Out came out, it was like the feeling that movie captured was just like oh, it's still there, but in a different way. Mm-hmm. In a way that you actually might be doing. Yeah,
that you might be playing a role in that you aren't thinking of
like
consciously.
It puts a mirror to you to just be like, fuck, have I said something as shitty as I would have voted for Obama a third term in front of a black person just to get points? You know what I mean? Have I done that?
Well,
but I love that's the power of like art in that way.
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. It raises awareness and gets people talking about those things.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's like what Bill Burr joked about, where he's like, "Real racism's quiet," whatever he said. He compared it to movies that deal with racism. But
yeah, and so I wanted to propose that question before we moved on.
So I absolutely, to answer, absolutely yes. You know, I think it's important for art to have things to say and have critiques about society, and especially things like RoboCop. With the fact that it's still applicable today, means that RoboCop paints a broad stroke about human nature as well as it does about, you know, our current corporate capitalistic system. You know what I'm saying? It still has things to say about, you know, where the line is drawn between the soul versus machine. You know, like those things are just forever questions. That's what's so cool about sci-fi in general.
Hell yeah.
You know,
one last thing I will say, when that news broke of Vance and Peter Hegseth accidentally including a Atlantic journalist into the group chat talking about bombing Yemen, that felt like straight out of something that Verhoeven would put in a news report.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean? It was like great. It was like unbelievable, and the Atlantic journalist was just like, "Yeah, they just kind of added me to this." He's like, "This is insane."
I know. I'm not laughing at what the actual political implications are of that, you know, whole exchange, but like I'm laughing at just how absurd it is. I'm laughing in discomfort.
Yeah,
to be clear. You know?
No, I think people know that. Yeah. Obviously, the world's hell, but anyways, okay, cool. So
you know what else is a little Verhoeven-y, by the way? We haven't talked about yet is Atlanta.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like the TV show Atlanta, for listeners who don't know. Anyone that hasn't watched Atlanta, fucking watch Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
The two ones the hills that I always die on throughout this entire run of the podcast will always be watch BoJack Horseman and watch Atlanta.
Yes.
Just before you die, you have to.
I want to ask you a question. Another question.
Yeah.
What's this movie's so much about like building a narrative, right? Mm-hmm. Like even with RoboCop, it's just like they're building this story that RoboCop's his hometown hero, with the movie starting with the news, having interstitial with commercials. I guess I wanted to ask you, like, what's your relationship with the news? Because this era of the news that this movie's covering is like the 5 o'clock news, the evening news, people sitting down after work. Now we've gone from 5 o'clock news to the 24-hour news cycle to just like constantly getting tweets, posts, and reactions to the news and not people actually reading the news. What is your relationship to the news?
You know, not much of one. I need more of a relationship with the news. I'm skeptical, and I'm not trying to say in the edgy, like I don't trust anything, but I always have like some guard up when it comes to information that's given to me. And you know that about me with anything, not even just with news, but with just people and stuff too. I'm always trying to kind of be like, is that really what happened? Or do you have something, or, you know, holding something, you know? And so often this is how I often find out about major world events. I'll scroll through an Instagram reel and I'll find a joke about it, a meme somewhere, or someone will re-edit something and I won't know what the fuck it is, and then I'll Google it and then I find out about it. That's about the extent of my news cycle. It's pretty stupid, you know what I mean? I need to work on it, and I'm expressing that now. I don't know how many people can relate to that, you know?
I'm sure most people consume, especially our age, consume news that way.
You are much more sophisticated than me when it comes to that, though, because you do actually, you know, you'll read like physical paper news.
Okay, so I'll tell you my journey in short. I wasn't reading the news. I used to be heavily on Twitter, and that's where I got most of my news. That was breaking my brain because I was realizing that a lot of what I'm reading is not the news, it's the reaction to the news. It's what I've been saying too many times over the past few months, is that we can't be reading the reaction to the news. We actually have to find the source. And so I was like, okay, let me actually, you know, just spend time going to the New York Times website or going to the Atlantic or going to just LA Times and actually consuming the news each morning. Just like really try to read articles again. And I know that sounds probably for an older audience, that sounds insane to say. I was like, oh, so you read the news like everyone in the world. But trust me when I say that wasn't something I was doing and it was a new habit.
I'm sure a lot of listeners get it.
And so, but that even became its own addiction to where I was just like constantly on it. And that was breaking my brain. And so now I'm at a point where I actually read physical newspapers because there's something nice about the fact that the news is over.
Yeah, there's no comment section attached to the news.
There's no comment section attached to the news. Once I read the paper, it's done. And I know it's not done because there's news happening all around the world and it's important to stay informed, but I believe that you have to your brain is not powered enough to take in all the information that's being thrown at you. You do not need to be informed 24/7 because that's going to break you like it broke me many times these past 2 months.
I know. I saw like a meme or something like that, and it was captioned something along the lines of like me wondering why I can't sleep after taking in more information than people hundreds of years ago have ever taken in their whole lives in like the span of an hour.
I know. And like when I watch this movie, it being so critical, this movie's so critical about news media. Mm-hmm. I watch it and I'm like, I wish news was still like this.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because I'm just like, now it's like if you turn on CNN, it's like 8 people screaming at each other because it's a 24-hour news cycle that has to keep going. Mm-hmm. Or it's fucking X, which I thank God I'm off of it now. But like Jesus, I'm never gonna go on again.
Sometimes it operates like, remember in the first Red Dead Redemption game? In Dutch Vanderland's in Dutch Vanderland's last couple sentences, he says, "When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster. They have to, because they have to justify their wages."
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of forever with every industry like that, you know?
Yeah. So, okay. Now let's get to the actual movie.
Yeah.
Peter Weller plays Alex Murphy.
And he's still to this day plays him. He's played him in Mortal Kombat, and he's also played him in that RoboCop Rogue City video game too.
Okay,
He still voices him to this day. It's pretty sick.
He is so good in this movie. When I watched it for this podcast, I kind of just forgot about the way he was before he turns into RoboCop.
Okay, just the normal Alex Murphy.
And I forgot that normal Alex Murphy, I'd see a cop movie with just him.
Yeah, he's still a great hero.
Him and Lewis, I'd see a buddy cop movie with.
Well, I heard they casted him because of how, he's a great actor, but also because of how slender he was.
Yes.
That they needed someone who can fit in the suit and not like a bulky dude.
He's a very lanky guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it works, and I think there's just something so... like I was mentioning earlier, I feel like the best movies are able to get you on board with the protagonist extremely quickly through small moves. We talked about this with Toy Story and Woody, how Woody immediately feels like a leader that helps out toys and is very supportive of everyone. And so you immediately relate to him. And then when his flaws start showing, you relate to his flaws as well. Mm-hmm. And they do this with RoboCop as well, how immediately he's practicing with that gun. And then Lewis asks him why, and he says, my kid watches this TV show, and he asked me if I can do that.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh, okay, so you really want to be a great dad. I immediately love you.
And he wants to be like a hero for his son.
The small thing, it only takes small things, but I love when a movie does that.
It's really efficient writing because a lesser screenwriter could have easily, cut away to him saying goodbye to his family and shown how good of a dad he is through a scene with his kid or something. But the script is so efficient that it's still focused on he's going to do the job and here's the villain and, the real priorities of the story, because the family you barely see them.
This is how efficient the movie is. The day we're introduced to Murphy is the day he dies.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. And it also works because by not showing his family, you also feel like you don't remember them with him when he's RoboCop.
So when he says the line that I think about a lot is I feel them, but I can't remember them.
Yeah.
It works because, like you said, we didn't have this BS scene in the morning of oh, hey, Slugger, how you doing?
Yeah, exactly. You get glimpses of it later after the fact, after his family's gone.
Yeah, you're trying to connect the way he is.
Yeah.
I love Nancy Allen in this movie as well. As Lewis. I've seen her in Blowout, and it was just a Brian De Palma movie.
She was in Carrie as well.
Yeah, she was in Carrie. It's just that she never really... It's funny, maybe I haven't seen much of her, but this is the first time I'm seeing her play kind of a straight man.
Yeah, play a likable hero type.
Carrie, she's despicable.
Yeah.
And in Blowout, she's this very... I hate to be rude, but she's really dumb in it.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen Blowouts.
Yeah. She's good in it, but her character is really dumb.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was just it's fun seeing her being kind of this badass cop.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of like find yourself leaning to her, at least for me when I watch it, because after he becomes RoboCop, she's the only one that notices all of the Alex mannerisms. So you really rely on her while you're watching to kind of like, wait, that's a thing, right?
And
like,
she's the only one that looks at RoboCop as a person and not as a showcase.
Yeah, she calls him Murphy and says it's you. I remember I showed this movie to a girlfriend at the time, and she didn't know anything about it going in, like anything. And so as soon as he first did that gun twirl, that cowboy gun twirl in the shooting range, when RoboCop, she realized it was Alex Murphy and didn't put together that, because she didn't know the movie was going to be about a dude turning into a robot or anything.
Right.
I mean, she knew it was called RoboCop, but you know what I'm saying.
But she didn't put together that that's the same guy?
Until he did the gun twirl thing.
So she didn't realize that, like, when they put it through the hospital, like, it was...
Well, he died. He was announced dead. And I don't know how, but she didn't.
I was
put it
like
together.
that. Okay. Yeah,
I've seen it happen before in some reactions too.
Oh, funny. Okay, interesting.
But what was it though? But she basically said like she was like, oh, I like how they just kind of reveal that it's him just through that without showing his face.
Yeah.
No,
that's true. That's true. Like that is that first inclination of Murphy's in there.
Yeah.
Because I knew when I first watched it, I'm like, just because of like the way they shot it, it's like they're showing you that's the guy. But I like that the first inclination of that's the real Murphy, his like soul or whatever you want to call it, is still in this robot, is that gun twirl. Mm-hmm. It's like such a great like screenwriting, like it gives you that flutter inside of just like, oh, that's so okay, yeah. Like, when there's sometimes with writing, it can be so strong and it can feel like it's a kind of movie screenwriting that Zemeckis does a lot.
Like the good setup and payoff kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to get to.
The satisfying setup and payoff.
Uh-huh.
That's not super obvious.
Yeah, where you like they were setting it up for you, but you didn't even know.
Yeah.
Like the car bump when he's getting out of the garage.
Oh, yeah, the little sparks that fly when he dings his car.
I mean, dead or alive, you're coming with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a line that I forgot that the actual Murphy did say before RoboCop.
Yeah. Yeah, well, when he says it, that's when I forgot the name of the villain, the guy who looks like Flea.
Yeah, the guy who looks like Flea, yeah, exactly. Who gets to have his like big body horror moment.
Yeah, just for that moment.
Fucking looks amazing too.
I know.
This movie still looks good. That's another thing we could talk about.
Oh, it looks incredible, dude. And it's still like realistic in the sense of like, I think we talked about this off mic a little bit, but when they're first introducing RoboCop and they're screwing everything in and all that stuff, remember how they're calibrating his targeting system and they're like holding the pen right here and follow, now do this. I'm like, that probably, if they built a robot, they have to calibrate it. They'd have to do something like that.
Oh yeah.
And they'd have to do this voice stressor where they're like,
I think my favorite like sequence is when he's coming into the police office for the first time.
Yeah.
And there's that shot that I think I referenced to you a lot, which is, Bob Morton and his team at OCP come in headstrong, and the chief officer is just like, what are you doing here or whatever? I got sneeze.
Woo! Bless you. We're keeping this, by the way.
Goddamn. Okay. Well, the chief officer is like, what are you doing here? And then suddenly you hear the clunk, clunk. RoboCop is coming in, and he walks in. And then he starts walking behind that like glass mosaic.
Mm-hmm. And he's kind of obscured behind it.
And it just suddenly feels like it makes you feel like this is like a machinery that they're wheeling in. It feels like a product. You know what I mean?
It's like when Buzz Lightyear was introduced or something like that.
100%. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to get at. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, even like the sound design is so fucking cool on RoboCop. Or just the movements and like all the precise like mechanisms.
That's the thing
so
about RoboCop
real.
is that aside from all the social satire, RoboCop's really cool.
I know, exactly. It's so fucking. He's like just as cool as Terminator or something.
Yes.
And when every step, it's like like you said, the clunk, like the sound, it makes this kind of like metallic suction-y, like with every footstep. I don't know how to describe it.
And especially the way Peter Weller like hit the physicality in his performance, the way he like twists his body as a robot. He's so good.
Yeah, and his voice, how it's all tinny. There's like this kind of filter. Clearly his voice is passed through when he talks.
And there's something that about the performance which pays off amazingly at the end.
Yeah.
You're always kind of trying to read him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel like that's a hard performance to pull off because as an actor, I bet you always want to kind of bring some sort of emotionality into your face because you're an actor. And Peter Weller does such a good job of playing a blank canvas, especially in the beginning, that you're constantly trying to read him. So then later on, when he lets in those kind of small smirks, You're kind of like, oh, he's becoming Murphy.
Yeah, his humanity's coming back.
Yeah, and it's exciting. It's like but it's the perfect match. It's what all great movies have, right? It's the perfect match between the technical aspects of filmmaking and just performance.
Yeah, it's a perfect marriage.
100%. You know, the sound design, the costume design, and then Peter Weller. You know
like
what I mean?
His voice is just so satisfying. I don't know how to describe it, but like when they're when on the news, when all the little kids are gathered around him and they're like, "Do you have anything to say to the kids?" And he's like, "Stay out of trouble."
Yeah,
it's I don't know what it is. I'm just like
it's a perfect
I'm so
balance
happy when I hear him talk.
It's a perfect balance between like it's not too menacing.
Mm-hmm. It's like intimidating, but it's also...
But it's not like a teddy bear. You know what I mean? It's like, it's right in the middle.
Yeah.
To where it could be disturbing if you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But, so yes, let's talk about the massacre that happens because of Kurtwood Smith, who plays just a wonderful villain. It's like a perfect 80s villain.
Yeah.
It's like what you want an 80s villain to be, where he comes into every scene being like a pure scumbag.
Monster,
just like a...
Clarence Boddicker.
An amazing name, flirting with the receptionist, just like, just so shitty.
And just spitting on the fucking papers at the police station.
Not afraid to throw his own henchman against the police car, saying the line that I love the most, which is, "Can you fly, Bobby?"
Yeah, I know, you do say that off mic a lot.
It's my favorite line.
Well, I think just as well, too, is I also like how smart he is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's small things that he does, but like even when he's first, getting ready to kill Peter Weller, how when they say what happened to his partner, when he's like, "I took her out," and he's like, "I bet that really pisses you off." Huh? Like he reads people, and it makes sense that he's the leader.
Yeah, and and there's something fun about watching him be a villain, which I think is important. You know what I mean? Especially in a genre movie like this. Tarantino talks about this kind of stuff a lot. Is when he was writing Inglourious Bastards and writing Christoph Waltz's character, he said that what he's most proud of is that face value, horrible person. But then also there's a part of you, because of Christoph Waltz's performance and the way Tarantino's written it, you kind of want him to find the bastards. Like, you kind of want him to do it because it's so much fun to see him figure it out.
You're still invested in him, yeah.
And so when I see Clarence Boddicker, like, walk into that cocaine factory, I'm like fucking excited.
Yeah, in his little gray suits. I mean, that whole gang is just fucking despicable in the best way possible.
I like it because when you go into their warehouse, it feels like they've been there for a while.
Yeah, and they're just these sleazy scumbags that just live together and steal shit and hurt people.
One of my favorite moves that one of the guys does, and it feels like such a Verhoeven move because he's a little like naughty, you know, is Lewis holding one of the guys at gunpoint as one of the guys was peeing, and he's like, "You want to let me finish first?" And she can't help but like look down.
He says, "You mind if I zip this up?"
You mind if I zip this up? She can't help but look down.
She was waiting for him to look too.
And she was like, and then he just got her. And I just think that's such a funny, like, Verhoeven.
Yeah, I mean, I've also read that there have been interpretations of like this movie has a lot to say about masculinity and like our violent instincts and stuff, because there's a couple dick shots throughout, and there's a lot of like horniness in it.
Also, women just being in the same locker room as men, which is what he really goes into that in Starship Troopers.
Exactly,
yeah.
And
Starship Troopers, like, now they let me do it.
Yeah, exactly. But like RoboCop obviously shooting the guy's dick when he was gonna R-word that girl. And then also the guy in the club trying to kick RoboCop in the dick and then hurting himself doing it. There's like a couple little isms. It might just be as simple as Paul Verhoeven's a horny filmmaker. But he does use sexuality very much as part of his as like a tool.
He is a horny filmmaker, but also like both can be true, right? He's also someone that like is super interested in masculinity.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, you watch Starship Troopers, it's all that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Total Recall.
The disturbing part, though, just when they're killing Alex Murphy, when the famously when they shoot his hand off and they're shooting the shit out of him.
It's so disturbing because they're like taunting him.
Well, that's the thing. It's like everyone's just laughing, and it's just so like it's just nothing to them.
It's humiliating.
And it's humiliating, and there's this constant feeling of like losing your humanity. Kind of like the corporate heads don't have any humanity, but then neither do they on the complete opposite end, And I don't know about you, but like I don't know if we may or may not end up cutting this out, but like, have you seen any like fucked up cartel videos? Listeners, do not look it up if
I know they exist. I haven't seen them.
They're like that. I will say, like that shit's real of how casual like horrific acts of violence can be to people. I think when I first watched it, that was like one thing that actually stuck with me. It was how casual the violence was to them.
Yeah, I've always heard about those videos existing on the internet, and I know people that have watched them. I know you've told me about how like watching that video, watching those videos kind of fucked you up too. It's, it like you said, it's very much real. I think something that I was thinking about watching this movie as I was starting to watch it is that it's 2025. A lot of people, I mean, I live in LA, so I know I live in a bubble, but a lot of people have a way more different view on cops that they did in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Rightly so. And I was like, is this going to be like a weird movie to watch in 2025 with how like sympathetic is towards cops? And I'm like, oh no, it's not like being sympathetic towards cops. It's being sympathetic towards humans. And like, it's being sympathetic towards this human, but it's just like, even with cops, it's being critical. It's being critical of like every big form of like, government and law enforcement and how they can all be bought out. Like it ages actually very well.
Story. I would say it's far more of a capitalism critique than it is like a law enforcement statement,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was just something I thought about.
Yeah. Well, even the idea of the, RoboCop having like his 4 prime directives, the flawed one was the one about that affected the corporation. It had nothing to do with upholding the law. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was like, RoboCop, like he was perfectly fine as a cop. He gave a shit about his job. He wanted to protect people.
It's just really nice that this movie is about so many big ideas, but the big center point is a very human story about like, when you live in this world of greed and capitalism, can you still maintain your identity?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And I just love that.
I love that, by the way.
Huh?
That's what it's about.
I know.
Just wanted to say it out loud because listeners would.
Because I'll catch it in the edit too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's about. He gets massacred. And then it's a rush to the hospital.
Which I'm surprised they even gave him the time of day in the hospital after getting shot to shit like that and then getting nailed in the head.
I know.
I was like, I'm surprised they're even considering him to maybe he can survive this. But then again, it is,
maybe there was a part of him that was still alive.
They'll fix you. They fix everything.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, he turns into RoboCop, but it's all from this like perspective, and it takes you through months of them transforming him. I don't know how long it had been, but
yeah, they just do some vague time jump. Yeah,
we see him turn into RoboCop all through this POV shot, turns into RoboCop, and then we get this like, well, first of all, before he goes on his first drive out, he catches those keys and says, thank you.
Yeah, I was hoping you would cover that part because I was excited.
And those are moments like the movie has those kind of moments that let you enjoy it as a fun 80s action movie too, which is what I love. Again, this movie's filled with ideas, but then you could also watch it as a fun action movie. Mm-hmm. If you want to watch it as just that and you don't give a shit about the other shit, you really could.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know how you would because the movie's so much about that, but still.
But I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of kids in the 80s, like small kids in the 80s that loved RoboCop growing up.
Totally.
And they probably did not give a shit about the social satire. They just loved the idea of a robotic cop, shooting and killing people.
Isn't that what Verhoeven at his height is so good at? It's like Starship Troopers is like that. It could be a movie. If you want to watch it as a movie about killing a bunch of bugs and great action set pieces, it has that. Like, there's very few filmmakers that are like him.
I mean, Total Recall, I would argue, has that too.
Yeah, of course.
Guy on the run from, a bunch of bad guys.
Technically, like, I'm talking about in terms of form, practical effects, I think Total Recall is Verhoeven's best movie.
Sure.
Just because it has some of the best practical effects I've ever seen.
I haven't seen
Special
Total Recall
effects,
in a minute.
Dude, it's really good.
I know. I was going to say, I've seen it again since the reaction. I think I've only seen it twice total now.
Yeah. It rules so hard. Quado's great. Okay, so, I mean, let's talk about that first, like, big, like, the woman... Well, this is not the first interaction that he has with criminals, but I'm talking about the one where, like, the woman's getting assaulted by these two guys.
Yes.
And he comes in, and it's just, like... the billboard of Delta City next to a brick wall, and then it's a huge silhouette of RoboCop.
Yeah, him just walking in.
Immediately an icon, right? And he just shoots them.
Shoots him in the dick.
Yeah.
And then he says famously, "Your move, creep."
I know. It's really sick. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I know, man. I mean, like, that whole first outing is just really fucking incredible. Like, obviously, if you go back a little bit, we have the little convenience store,
which is where we're introduced with "I'll buy that for $1."
Exactly. I was gonna say. Then we have the famous, like, "I'll buy that for $1." Ha ha ha. Is there, not to totally derail, but is there any meaning you think there's there, or do you think it's kind of just a funny little gag that comes and goes?
The guy in that thing in the TV that says "I buy that for dollar" is like with these like two like girls with huge tits, and he's very indulgent.
Yeah,
he feels like a guy that just like is just excessively indulgent in everything.
He like has the cake and then he like just puts it on her chest and he's like, oh, ha, ha.
Right. And it's just the "I'll buy that for $1" very much is about like I'll like anything for me, like
excess consumption,
and that is the answer.
Yeah,
you know what I
mean.
mean.
It just everyone throughout just laughs their ass off watching it too.
Well, that's my favorite thing about the movie is that it does the movie thing, which I always love in a funny way, where people sit down in front of like a comedy in the movie, like they sit down on their couch. And on the TV, there's a comedy, and they immediately start laughing. It's not even like a second where they're kind of like, okay, what am I watching? It's like,
yeah, it's like all of Detroit's been watching I'll Buy That for $1. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a popular show, clearly.
Yeah.
Always on. Everyone's watching it.
It's yeah, I know. It's like the world building is like.
But it seems like only men watch it though. Like even at that gas station or the convenience store couple. You know, it seems like wasn't the guy the only one that was watching? She was off on the side.
This movie has also very few women.
Yeah, it's very much a man's world that is establishing.
I mean, also, I think that's very intentional too. Yeah. Like, but
anyway, though, yeah, when he first strolls in and then he's getting shot up and he's yelling like "fuck me," and he literally grabs a barrel of his gun and bends it, and I realized that Dark Knight took from that.
Yeah. I know. I know, man. I didn't realize it until you just said it right now.
Which isn't RoboCop also famous for this? And I don't want to just go in totally like covered territory if everyone else and their mothers talked about it, but doesn't RoboCop have isn't it known for having like a shitload of people flying through glass? Have you heard about that?
It does have that, yeah.
Have you heard about that? People have talked about it though, like counted how many times people get thrown through
I didn't know that
glass
was
in
like
the
a
movie.
thing, but yeah.
Yeah, like obviously like RoboCop punches the guy and he crashes through, and then he throws the main villain through glass like twice when he's arresting him, and then the main villain gets shot out of a window. You know, there's a lot of people getting thrown through glass.
Shout out to Dick Jones really quickly. Ronnie Cox is Dick Jones, who's also in Total Recall, who just plays a great like
he plays the same character in Total Recall, basically.
And those are the type of guys where I'm like, that guy exists. Yeah. That guy's real. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I fear that we haven't talked about like big set pieces in this movie, but also I feel like that's been covered a lot, and I wanted to talk about like a lot of the ideas that are explored.
Yeah, to be fair, man, just to cut ourselves some slack, I feel like a lot of people come to the show for us to talk about the ideas. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying we shouldn't cover. Obviously, like I said, I fucking love the action scenes and everything, and people have seen our reactions to action scenes. Our minds being blown. You know?
yeah. I get self-conscious about that sometimes, but okay, so, basically, RoboCop and Dick Jones have that confrontation where RoboCop realizes what Directive 4 was. Mm-hmm. He gets heavily injured by all the cops that are there at gunpoint for him.
Yeah, he gets shot to shit.
Lewis saves him, basically. His helmet's gone, and now is just Murphy's face, which, again, when I look at it, I'm like, how does that look so fucking good?
It looks insane how good. Like, yeah, like the transition of the skin there, it's absurd. Because
when I saw Ex Machina, I was like, whoa, how did they pull that off? And then you realize in 1987 they did that shit? Like, it's crazy, you know what I mean? Anyways, that's when, like, I love that small moment where his targeting system's fucked up and Lewis like helps him, and there's that moment of just like he's gonna aim like a human again and not like a robot. Like it's perfect but a little imperfect. Like I really like that.
Well, it's interesting too that he's shooting like little cans of baby food too.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's an intentional
isn't
thing.
That what he has to consume?
Yeah, but him shooting it though, I do wonder if there's some type of like him letting go of his family type of metaphor in there or anything like that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it's just interesting that was because normally when people do practicing of shooting, they just shoot glass bottles or something.
We're jumping around, but we didn't mention like him going to his old house.
Yeah.
That's like a pretty haunting scene.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like it's actually scary to me in a weird way. I don't know if you feel this way, but like
that's how they treat it.
The moment where he like has the memory of his house fully furnished, and he's like watching his kid watch TV and all that stuff. But then it does that hard cut to a wide shot and the house is empty and he's just kind of there. Is really creepy.
Yeah, it is. It's a little like unsettling. And then he ends up punching the TV because there's like a whole TV that's supposed to walk you through the tour.
And it's the first time he's like shown emotion. That's that's the whole thing. Anyways, Kurtwood Smith comes to the warehouse with the orders to kill him. RoboCop like is just so calm and collected, where he's like looking for me.
Yeah.
And we get that toxic waste moment, which is amazing. Great, like just fucking body horror shit. Looks so cool.
Oh yeah, when he like goes and hugs, like, woo! And then the other guy just dude. My favorite is just the way he screams. His face is like, ah, get off me, man! Whatever he says.
I know.
My other favorite line, because you say, "Can you fly, Bobby?" My other favorite line from him is, "Bitches leave." That's my other favorite line.
Bitches leave is pretty good. God.
The whole scene's pretty funny, but when he goes in, he's like, "Bitches leave."
So awesome. RoboCop defeats all of them. We already mentioned the line, "They'll fix you, they fix everything."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does that line mean to you?
It's like it's clearly meant to be sarcastic, because he's living in this kind of personal hell in a way between man and, where he's like human, but not quite at the same time, because he has no real memory, but he's starting to get that back. And so I think he's saying sarcastically, like, yeah, they'll take care of you, but they'll take everything from you at the same time,
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like just RoboCop as a character is kind of a metaphor of, of like a person trying to exist in a world of capitalism. You know what I'm saying? At least that's the way I see it.
Well, yeah,
like we're all kind of living like RoboCop in our own ways, trying to regain parts of ourselves and kind of.
Well, I'm going to talk about it, but I do think this movie ends in an optimistic way, even with its ideas, aside from the actual literal sense. But we'll talk about it because I want to touch on what you just said. So he goes back to the OCP building, and Ed's there. Mm-hmm. Immediately,
which
just
we haven't talked about yet all podcast. Ed.
I like Ed. I do think that's the one part of the movie where I'm like, the stop motion's a little janky and it doesn't but it's charming.
Yeah, and I do think there's still meaning behind it. I agree the stop motion is, it's charming. I like it, just for that reason. It feels like love was put into it. And even that scene, of course, when he machine guns that guy in the suit's fucking hilarious.
I love squibs. Can I just say that? We need to bring squibs back. Yeah. Squibs are so much fun. Look at all that blood. It looks so cool.
I know, right? They do, yeah. Verhoeven is the king of squibs.
Yeah.
But that maybe there's someone else is the king of squibs, but anyway, though.
Everyone's up there.
Yeah. But the fact that, that the perfect blend between, or the perfect cop, I guess, in this world is part machine, but still has a human set of organs that, it's just a funny contrast when you first meet Ed, that he fucks up immediately and he can't even go downstairs.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Which they even said, early on, we have 205 spare parts. Who cares if it didn't work?
Well, that line isn't if you really read into that line, that's the part that kind of scares me sometimes.
Is how true to life it is.
Is that when you hear people like fucking Musk when rockets go down and, when whatever Teslas are catching on fire or whatever, right? There is this feeling of who the fuck cares? I'm building shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Who the fuck you? I'm building shit. What are you doing with your life? And it's that kind of attitude. It's very real still. You know what I mean?
And I got to stress, I said it in the beginning of this podcast, but none of those suits give a shit about the safety of the citizens.
No, of course
they're not building things to protect people at all. They're building things to make money, and sell
to protect themselves.
Yeah, to protect themselves. None of them have to deal with any of the crime and corruption. They're the corrupt ones,
Well, so he gets into that conference room, proves that Dick Jones is guilty. So yeah, RoboCop gets his basically revenge and gets to have justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
because he finds a loophole in the directive by firing him.
He's like, "You're fired. Thank you."
The famously long arms when he falls.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
For listeners, I'm sure you've all heard it. He has the funny long arms when he's falling out of the building.
It's one of those wonderful movie mistakes. The way Galaxy Quest has that, Sigourney Weaver clearly said "fuck."
Oh yeah.
It's up there with that for me. And then, okay, so let's talk about this moment. I feel like this is another part of the movie that changed me heavily. The final moments of this movie made me realize that endings can be this way. You can have an ending so fucking efficient where once the character completes its arc, boom, RoboCop. It's done. We're out of here. No fourth act. No extra fat.
No epilogue.
So, Chris, let's.
You want me to
I'll-
walk through?
No. I'll walk through it because I make you do this ending
Yeah.
a lot.
So he shoots Dick Jones and he falls out of the window. RoboCop sits there. He swings his gun into his holster. And maybe I'm going out of order, but then I forget the name of the black dude, but he gives the thumbs up.
Oh, it's Donald Johnson, and because I wrote him down because I love him. Felton Perry as Donald Johnson, and I put in a parentheses so I would remember. I put thumbs up guy.
The head, the CEO, stands up, adjusts his tie. Nice shooting, son. What's your name? And then RoboCop walks, and he stops and turns his head over. Murphy. And then he smiles, and then turns and starts walking. Then we hard cut to black.
It's amazing. I mean, don't you agree? Like when we both watched it, we were just blown away.
We were like out of our seats of how excited we were. Again, I gotta stress, like it would have made such a good reaction video. Like I don't want to tease the listeners with it who like the reactions, but I'm like, you guys should have been there for that.
In our reactions, our viewers might have like seen in multiple reaction videos me saying this movie ends right when it needs to.
Yeah.
I started saying that after I watched RoboCop. When I realized, no, movies can be this way. You don't always have to have a bullshit fourth act of like where the characters are now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once like
They could have easily ended on this big news segment of what happened after, what happened to the company and yada yada. But the story at the end of the day was about Alex Murphy.
And we're done. Dude, this movie, how long is this movie?
Like an hour, 43 minutes or something like that, is it?
Let me look it up. I want to get it exactly right. RoboCop length. This movie is at 1 hour and 43 minutes long.
Damn, I got it right. That's pretty cool.
But is that insane?
Yeah.
A movie with this many big ideas, this genre heavy, comes in less than 2 hours?
Yeah, that's pretty sick.
Movies today can't even, don't have the balls to do something like that.
And for listeners, by the way, Altaf makes me do the final Murphy line. Like he that's how much this ending means to him. He'll randomly just be like, oh, can you do it, by the way? Nice shooting, son. What's your name? And he'll like cue me up to pretend to be RoboCop.
Yeah, I'll do the nice shooting, son, because Chris does a really good RoboCop. Okay, so our fans wrote in when we asked them how this movie changed them.
Yes, we got a lot of write-ins too.
Email us at moviesthatchangedus@gmail.com. But cool, I'll start with Daniel Walsh, who always writes in. We love him. My experience with RoboCop for the last several years has been one you might expect from someone young as me. Up to this point, I had seen a few good action classics, but not this one. I watched it for this podcast a day late as I'm writing. So, oh wow, he watched it for the first time. This film has been one that has been lingering in my mind for years, constantly thinking, man, I should watch RoboCop, but I just never got around to it. But today I thought, hey, it's a Friday night, I got nothing to do, and I decided that I would just watch it. And already, this has become one of my favorite action movies.
Hell yeah.
Up there with the likes of The Terminator. It has many awesome set pieces, very cool special effects, and a compelling story that really hits you hard in the beginning. Alex is such a lovable main character. Agreed, man.
Yeah.
And he cemented his place as one of our great action heroes. Throw in some sadistic villains, and we've got an amazing action movie. Those are pretty much all my thoughts. Until next time, fellas, your guy, Dan.
Yeah, you're our guy, Dan.
Hell yeah, man.
Thank you for writing in. Yeah, I'm so super glad you enjoyed it. And I hope you rewatch it. Hope it becomes like part of your regular rotation now.
I'll flip the laptop just so it's easier for you, but you want to read for Brad T?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this next one's from Brad T. I was 6 years old when I saw the VHS cover of RoboCop in a mom and pop video rental store and said out loud, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. And 37 years later, I still feel that way. It started with the design of the character for me, but the movie has grown and revealed different layers over the years. Some film historians said it best. RoboCop is like a nesting doll. It keeps giving and giving the more you strip away the layers. The writer, Ed Neumier, called the movie Fascism for Liberals, which is both hilariously succinct and pretty accurate. It's weird to say RoboCop has changed me since I've been a giant fan most of my life. It started my love for film in general, and it made me a collector for sure. I'm a 43-year-old with RoboCop rooms sporting all kinds of robo-paraphernalia like theater lobby standees, posters, figures, press kits, comics, promo materials, and a handful of screen-used props like one of the targets from the firing range scene. That's pretty sick. A piece of baby food jar label, and Auto 9 casings from the scene at the steel mill toward the end.
Whoa.
And I have one of the 2 Hero Auto 9s, screen matched to the first movie. So yeah, big fan, Brad T.
That's awesome.
That is fucking amazing.
A committed fan of RoboCop.
I was going to say, that's one thing as well that we didn't really touch on that's probably a generational gap, but RoboCop has so much merch there are so many action figures of RoboCop I've seen, and like you said,
it makes
props
sense.
And, it did spawn like a very big like multimedia franchise. There's still like they did a crossover comic series of RoboCop and Terminator meeting, and
now there's like he's in the Mortal Kombat games, like.
Well, and they joke about it too when RoboCop and Terminator are gonna fight and they do their intros to each other. He'll literally RoboCop will literally say like, "We've met, I'm sure of it,"
Yeah.
And he's like, "I do not remember this encounter."
So this next person the name is spelled Ville. I don't know how to pronounce it.
VA, I think.
VA. Hi guys. I was 7 or 8 when I first saw the movie when it came out on VHS in Finland. Wow, pretty young to watch RoboCop. It was heavily censored at the time, but it was probably still quite brutal. Murphy's death was a bit much. Still, that didn't stop me from loving the movie and drawing my own Donald Duck comic book version of RoboCop.
Hell yeah.
I don't think Donald died in it, though. I was also sad when Bobby died. I was definitely way too young to understand how over the top everything was, kind of like when Arnie uses assault rifles with one hand in Commando. Chris, you gotta watch Commando. I just thought that's how things are. It was only much, much later that I began to understand what good movies are and why Verhoeven is such a great director, especially after seeing his Dutch films and realizing how dynamic his visual storytelling is and how a certain exaggeration or provocation is his signature style. Best regards, VA. Okay. Dutch films. I need to check out his foreign films.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, we've only seen like the
big three.
Yeah, the big three that he's done.
I haven't seen Showgirls. I want to watch Showgirls.
You want to watch Showgirls just to have it under your belt?
Well, I know there's some people that are like, now there's this reclamation project coming in with Showgirls.
Yeah.
There's some people that are being like, it's actually good.
Well, I was going to say, like, I love you, and I think I've already talked about this, but you do love windows to be contrarian. You know what I mean? If you hear that there's something famously critically acclaimed or vice versa, famously disliked, and you hear someone has an opposing view to it, you do jump in very quickly to be like, oh, I got to check it out. I want to have a take. And that's great. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah, I don't try to be contrarian. I know that's because I know that's very annoying. But
no, I'm not saying it annoying.
I always try to have my own opinion on it.
I think you're interested in polarizing art. You know what I mean? I think that's really what it is. So yeah, maybe I don't mean to sound condescending when I say contrarian, but I do know you get excited to go against the grain sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, which I get. Okay, I'm gonna tilt this so I can read better. Okay, this is from Jesse. Just for the record, we did have to cut these down a little bit, just for the sake of keeping it clean to read. So,
and also there were 2 emails that I couldn't include just for the sake of time, and I want to apologize for that. But yeah,
I mean, honestly, we got way more write-ins than we're used to. The last 2 episodes we didn't get any write-ins at all. So this is a good problem to have. But just know, please keep writing in. We do read them all personally.
Yes.
Just know that.
Yes,
even if we don't read it out loud on the show. This is from Jesse. Hey dudes, I'm Jesse, but we're here to talk about RoboCop. I was born in 1986, which means by the time I was old enough to remember anything, the masterpiece RoboCop was already on tape. I don't know exactly when it became my favorite movie, but by the time I was 6, I know I'd already watched it more times than I can count. See, this is what I was saying, by the way, that a lot of little kids in the 80s watched RoboCop.
Yeah.
Which is like, we just didn't get that. We didn't have those crazy violent movies that we watched all the time.
I mean, I especially didn't with American movies, for sure.
Yeah. I was RoboCop walking around the house as early as I can remember walking, doing my best Clarence Boddicker impressions. Can you fly, Bobby?
Hell yeah.
There were days I'd watch RoboCop or even RoboCop 2 multiple times. I used to want to be a cop because of RoboCop. RoboCop has been like my own personal measuring tape for morality. RoboCop and Master Splinter, LOL. Those are good guides to have for morality.
Yeah.
The wisdom of Master Splinter. When I was 8 or 9, my best friend, still know the guy to this very day, Briscoe, and I watched RoboCop over and over together. The part in the warehouse where Lewis brings Robo baby food and he's like, no thank you, I'm not hungry, had us cry laughing for days. Don't know why, but just how earnestly she says, I brought you some food, and how his voice sounds when he replies absolutely killed us. We still talk about it. Which, just side note, I love those moments in movies where it's like only our thing, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah.
Did I tell you what my cousin and I have with The Empire Strikes Back?
What?
Did I ever tell you that? So, in the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke is on Hoth, when he sees the Imperial drone or whatever, and he's going to investigate it, he says in the walkie-talkie, I'm going to check it out. It won't take long. For some fucking reason, when him and I were kids, me and my cousin, we just repeated that to each other again and again.
Like the way he said it?
Yeah, and it's only because we had the DVD main menu playing, and it had a bunch of sound bites throughout, and that was in there, so we kept waiting for him to say it.
It was like your big claptrap line.
I don't know why, but we were probably
Like I'm just imagining
9 or 6, you know.
I'm just imagining if you were one of the directors of the new trilogy, you would put that line in there. Like you would make Luke say it.
Yeah, can you say it? It's like such a nothing line, but for some reason him and I still to this day will quote it. But
Okay, that's really cool.
anyway, back to the letter. So Briscoe and I still communicate regularly and send each other every RoboCop meme we see. He is more of a brother to me than my blood brother. What a great movie. The greatest movie of all time, in my opinion. Here's a picture of my NECA RoboCop action figure, LOL.
We'll share it in the video.
Yeah. So he sent it. Thank you so much for that letter, Jesse. We really appreciate that. That's really cool that a movie can bond you with a friend like that. The fact that it got me excited to bring up something with Star Wars, that's kind of, Star Wars is to me what RoboCop is to you, Jesse.
Yeah. Oh, totally. To me, what Star Wars is to you and what RoboCop is to Jesse is what Rosemary's Baby is to me. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
Exorcist.
I know.
Deer Hunter.
Friedkin Sorcerer. Anyways, well, thank you guys so much for sending in emails. We really appreciate it. Keep sending them in as we announce our new episodes on our Instagram or here on our YouTube channel and during our community posts. You can follow us on Instagram at Movies That Changed Us. Thank you so much to our patrons for supporting us again and again. We really appreciate it. Last but not least, stay nice, dudes.